Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. Welcome back. As many of you know by this point, I'm Steph Barrington. I'm the Director of Industry Programming here at the OIAF. We are very excited to be presenting this important conversation in collaboration with ASIFA-Hollywood on telling authentic stories. As always, we love to see your comments and questions in the chat, so please feel free to post your burning questions here for our speakers. I'll now hand it over to our moderator, Aubry Mintz. Aubry is the Director of Animation and VFX at Chapman University. Aubry, over to you.
Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you, Ottawa Film Festival. So wonderful to be here. Our panel today is here to reflect on creating genuine stories, characters, and projects that explore various underrepresented cultures and communities, presented in partnership with ASIFA-Hollywood. As you've probably learned in the past, you can ask questions along the way and we'll see it in the chat. I may interrupt the flow of things to ask your questions, or I may save them to the end. We'll see how it all flows here. We have three incredible panelists joining us. First, I would like to introduce Sidney Clifton, Senior Vice President of Animation Mixed Media at the Jim Henson Company. She's an Emmy-nominated producer. Over 20 years of experience as an executive and producer of animated and live action content across multiple platforms. At the Jim Henson Company, she's Senior Vice President of Animation and Mixed Media and serves as Senior Consultant with Black Women Animate. Her passion for developing and supporting the underserved community of writers, artists, storytellers, and creators was a catalyst for her launching the Clifton House, a writers and artists workshop and retreat space centered at her childhood home in Baltimore, Maryland, where she grew up with her family. And her mother, Lucille Clifton, was the National Book Award-winning poet and author. Welcome, Sidney.
Thank you. Delighted to be here. Thank you.
And next on my screen, we have Nikki Lopez, creator and executive producer of Nick Jr.'s Santiago of the Seas. Nikki Lopez is Puerto Rican, and she's a showrunner, writer, and visual artist working in the animation industry, of course. She's a creator and executive producer of Nick Jr.'s preschool series, Santiago of the Seas. She's had an incredible career so far, beginning in the industry as a coveted Nickturn for Nickelodeon Animation Studios, then production assistant on Kung Fu Panda Legends of Awesomeness, and then a color designer on The Fairly Odd Parents, Harvey Beaks, and Glitch Techs. In 2018, the world took notice, and Lopez was selected as one of Variety's 10 animators to watch. Big deal. Animation Magazine called her one of the 2020 rising stars of animation. And most recently, she was featured in Variety Select's Family Entertainment Impact Report list. Welcome, Nikki.
Thank you. Very nice to be here.
Good to meet you too. And finally, last but not least, we have Raul Garcia, our director and producer, born in Madrid. Raul was an animator on international feature films ranging from Asterix and Caesar Surprise, The Land Before Time, and of course the groundbreaking Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which exploded his career to Walt Disney Studios, where he worked as an animator for 10 years during their great renaissance on such films as Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, The Lion King, Hunchback, Hercules, Pocahontas, and Fantasia 2000. Then Raul became a sequence director for Paramount on films like Rugrats in Paris, The Wild Thornberrys movie, and Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius. And then creative director with the award-winning short film Telltale Heart. and co-writer and director on the feature film, The Missing Links, winner of Goya Award for Best Animated Feature in 2008. He produced the Academy Award nominee short, The Lady and the Reaper with Antonio Banderas, and director and producer of the animated feature Extraordinary Tales, based on Edgar Allan Poe's stories Extraordinary Tales, which earned a nomination as Best Director of an Independent Feature Film at the 2016 Annie Awards. Welcome, Raul.
Great. I'm so glad to be here, and it's going to be great. Thank you.
So today we're going to talk about authenticity, which will lead to diversity, and we'll ask some challenging questions, but hopefully can create this engaging environment that hopefully the audience can ask more questions about as well. So let's just start with the basics, because the title is Authentic Stories. How would you define authentic stories? And can you give some examples of shows you've worked on or projects that follow your definition of authentic storytelling? Cindy, would you like to start?
Why, sure. Essentially, authentic stories for me mean stories that are told from characters who have lived experience of the characters that you see on the screen. So while in many cases, and I think ideally, we're talking about stories that spring from writers and creators who are creating something from their experience. It may be someone who is creating something from a learned experience that has also engaged with someone who has that authentic experience. But it's about honesty and the translation one-to-one for one's feelings, issues, experiences from their brain and their heart and their spirit to that screen.
Beautiful. Raul, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, authentic stories are something that come from the heart, and that somehow reflects part of you as an artist, as a director, as a screenwriter. An authentic stories is something that can be very local, very focused in your culture and in your ideas, but that can be easily extrapolated to a worldwide audience. So it doesn't matter where the story takes place, and doesn't matter that the story is zeroing in some particular culture. The stories which spring from that, they're universal enough that can be enjoyed by a worldwide audience.
So it's going from the specific experience to connecting with the audience in a universal way.
Yeah.
Nikki, how would you define it?
Much like what has been said before, to me, authentic stories have specificity. They don't rely on exhaustive tropes and stereotypes. These stories are multifaceted, and they have depth because they include the voices and perspectives of those communities that are being represented on screen.
And that actually leads great into my next question. Thank you. It's why is it important to tell a variety of stories from different cultures and representation? Nikki, do you want to start with that?
I mean, for me, there's two super important reasons. One, it fosters and strengthens a sense of pride in our viewers. It's one of those things that I see myself, therefore I can be what I see. For example, a hero. And the other one is because it helps encourage curiosity and empathy in others, which it's so needed in this day and age.
Absolutely. Raul or Sidney, would you like to respond to that question as well?
Honestly, I mean, in addition to what Nikki said, I think it's important for us to tell the truth about what people's lives are like and what the world looks like. We have not seen the full truth of human lives. And so in addition to growing empathy and understanding, I think being able to dismantle stereotypes and mythologies and tropes even makes it important for people to see themselves and the real world. And so it's not just serving underserved communities and artists and creators. It serves everyone to see the truth of the world on screen.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, definitely, I agree with that. We're kind of fighting with in a world where stereotypes and cliches are the formula, and especially in animation, we have seen that over and over again. And somehow telling your own stories or telling a story who include part of your culture is something to demonstrate that those cliches are not true. And at the same time, it really gives a sense of pride to people who sees their story reflected in the screen.
Let's get into that a little bit. Nikki brought up, when you see yourself, then you can relate a little bit more. When I was chair of a large art department, I'd hear from our underrepresented minority students, why don't my professors look like me? And up until fairly recently, we'd see animated live action films with predominantly homogenous, often white characters, cast, creators, crew, and even background characters. So the question I'm putting to the panel is, are we making progress? And how do we move the needle from what was shamefully acceptable practice to proper representation of our global cultures and communities?
I think we are making progress. I think it's slow, but I think that the more progress we make, the more velocity and volume we'll see in these spaces. We certainly have to have more people in leadership. We need people who make the decisions, who do the recruiting, et cetera. We need them to not only either be diverse or understand why that diversity, why that inclusion is important. We need people to make space. And how we do that is we continue to slog through the sometimes tedious aspects of this growth. We don't be quiet. We don't take any progress for granted. And we continue to sort of, lift up and reach back to just be mindful and intentional about making space, making decisions, being loud, recruiting and making ways for other people.
Nikki or Raul?
I mean, much like what Sidney said, yes, we've made progress considering how abysmal things were before. Sure, we've done something, but I think we have yet to achieve population parity on screen and behind the screen. How do we change it? Yes, we speak up. We're loud. We reach. Once we reach, I feel we have this opportunity to lead. We make sure to expand that table and make room for more diverse talent, and we empower them. We fight for them. We make sure that they do not exist in this limbo where there's no growth, so that one day they can be the gatekeepers of Hollywood and are more invested, genuinely invested in bringing forth an authentic story rather than doing it for superficial, buzzworthy reasons.
I think that behind the camera, we have made very, very good progress. I mean, I think there's nothing more diverse than any animation crew or any live action crew in Hollywood, and especially in animation. About the product, about what we do and the stories we tell, slowly is going, doing the little indent there on popular culture. There are little steps, but I think there's really important. And speaking about like the Latino community or the Spanish-speaking audiences, I think right now it's a good moment to tell that kind of stories, and it brings some sense of pride to everybody involved. The fact that any character in any given movie is Latino without falling into the cliche and just being there is something that they still need a little bit more of work, because usually the portrayal of Latino people in movies still is in the kind of like bad guy, narco traffic, gang leader, etc., etc. But slowly, I think we're going to reach to that point where a character of certain ethnicity is just the hero of the movie without further question asked. And I think that what we're looking for. We're looking for that normality where we accept that the main character of a movie is the main character of the movie without seeing the race, culture, creed. And that's something that I think is very, very important. And slowly, we're making slow steps, but I think we're getting there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's key, and Nikki brought it up as well. It's, you know, we can do as much as we can as creators and developers, but ultimately there's this kind of Hollywood executive suite, right? And the decisions continue to be dominated by white men at 11 major and mid-major studios. Looking at the UCLA Hollywood Diversity Report 2020, it says the heads of these studios, chair and CEO, were 91% white and 82% male, and which is a very small progress from 2015, where studio heads were 94% white and 100% male. So it's progress, but a very slow progress. So do you, you know, as in your own experience going into a lot of these meetings and developing and pitching, and do you see difficulties or challenges with the with moving that needle, I guess I'd say, in your own projects?
It's kind of complicated and it's slow. And obviously, in the case of independent filmmakers, it's even harder because you don't have an organization behind that will fight for you. But in general, I find more acceptance now in the last few years that I ever found in my life. Of course, there's always, you know, problems inherent to having an accent and this kind of thing, because sometimes some people don't understand that one thing is what I say, another thing is what I think and what I can produce, and maybe the grammar will be off, but the ideas are there, the concepts are there, and everything is there to make a really interesting movie. But in general, yeah, I think again, it's very little steps, but we're getting there. So in my personal experience, I think that now there's certain openness to see what we can provide to the Hollywood industry from a different perspective than the mainstream Hollywood.
Yeah, there's definitely been a lot of press around DEI efforts, and because of that, there's this sense of accountability in a lot of studios. So they're doing their research to make sure that they provide a space for being inclusive to diverse voices. And right now, and speaking earnestly, I feel like I feel much more supported by the studio. But in my early days of development, gosh, like 5 years ago or so, the experience wasn't as good, and I was definitely questioned by a lot of people that didn't even share my cultural background, yet they were questioning a lot of my own heritage. So thankfully, that's changing, but it's been a work in progress.
I would say for me, it has depended on what room I was in and what I wanted from that room. Early in my career, I had very similar experiences that Nikki describes, where either someone questioned my experience, or I became the Black people police, where essentially they can ask me any question about anything having to do with anyone Black, and it may have been about someone Caribbean or Haitian, and not understanding that there's not this one monolithic Black voice and experience. But I also, so if I was in those rooms and answering those questions or having those conversations would help educate someone and illuminate them and open their minds to different perspectives or a different way of thinking of things, then that was worth it to me to have those conversations, even if it was exhausting and annoying, and even if that was a pivot to what I wanted. If I was pitching, if I was on an interview or something, I would say, there's a level of sacrifice at times to get the kind of progress that you want. And I've become clear in my life that in some rooms, my job is to make is to make someone think differently, is to educate someone. And it may not, there may not be any personal gain in it, but it's a long game, this progress. So I just feel like in whatever room I'm in, I want to do my part to make that space, to educate, to, if I can pitch a story and people understand different people's lives, that's great. But it won't always be there will not always be personal gain in that conversation, but it must be had. It must be had, and it requires sacrifice. It reminds me of this. There's this one of the lines in the Martin Luther King "I Have a Dream" speech where he's saying, "I may not get there with you," and I always keep that in the back of my mind because this kind of progress and hard work, sometimes you won't see personally the results of that. But if we know that down the line someone else will benefit from that and things will get better, then that's the job.
It's an incredibly important job, and it's amazing that you're willing to take those conversations and go that distance. However, like reading there was a Time magazine report or article today that talked about the expectation, especially on Black women, they call it this superwoman schema, and where it's like you have to, on top of everything else that you have to do now, you have to explain to other people and get people on board. So that's a lot of pressure, and especially if there's very few BIPOC people in an institution, because then it falls on these very few people, almost like tokens at times. So how do you, or I guess the question is more, how do we solve that, and what's the solution there?
I've had the conversations, or I've been in rooms where it's the risk of saying something that's really uncomfortable. And I think that you have to be able to know, to read your room and know when that's going to be received well. And even if one person receives it, that can be enough. So for example, I mean, this issue is not for people of color to solve. White people have to be part of this issue, have to be part of the solution, and have to be intentional about that, and have to sacrifice being uncomfortable and feeling however the boys are going to make them feel in that room. And if you are secure enough in your space to understand that I'm going to be not only an ally but an advocate and an accomplice in this space, then I think we can collectively make that change and get some velocity going. But it does not behoove the people of color to make the change.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I'm going to call out some statistics here just to see if this does anything. From the UCLA Hollywood Diversity Report and the USC Annenberg Inclusion Initiative Report from June 2019. People of color and women remained underrepresented on every industry employment front. Less than 3-to-1 among film directors, 15%. Even worse in animation was only 3% women and 1% women of color. Less than 3-to-1 among film writers, which was 13%. Better for animation with 19% women, but 4% women of color. And greater than 4-to-1 among studio heads, which was 9% for BIPOC and 3-to-1 for women. Often you hear, it's about the bottom line in our industry, and yet people of color accounted for the majority of domestic ticket sales for 6 of the top 10 films. So with stats like these, why do you think we're not seeing more representation? And why is it important for underrepresented artists to have more prominent positions in productions? That was a lot. Sorry.
It's interesting because it seems that there's a dichotomy here between the industry and what the industry does, and then the upcomers and people who get into the industry. And it seems to be that 2 different planets. I mean, I teach animation in LaSalle College of the Arts in Singapore, and I will say 98, 99% of my students are female, with very strong views, with very strong artistic ideas, and those are the future. I mean, this is people who are now in their 20s, 21, 23, and those are the ones who are going to inherit the industry. So maybe it's a question that the change is about to come, but still the Hollywood establishment still is living in that old past.
Mhm.
Nikki or Sidney, anything to add?
I would say not only living in the past, but really comfortable.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely.
The way it is. And until people get uncomfortable enough to see that it is important and why it's important to make space for executives and the people who write the checks, who greenlight the films, who recruit and hire. I don't know that it's going to change without something drastic or lots of noise and lots of continued noise and progress. But we also the industry being driven by the bottom line decide we can always redefine what the bottom line is and how we get to it. I think that's a conversation that but happens at the top. And it feels to me in terms of content, I think we need to the industry needs to decide whether it's important to tell the truth or not. If it's important to reflect the world as it is or not. And if that's not important, I think let's just be real and say that, and then make a change based on at least we know what we're up against. But what becomes frustrating to me is, I would go to, I was a recruiter for multiple years, and I also love to go to art schools and talk to students. And I see so many women, just like Raul was describing, that so many women in animation classes, which is really, really encouraging, exciting to see Nikki doing what she's doing. That's encouraging and exciting. But by the same token, we also know these are steps, but the people in charge are looking at spreadsheets.
Yeah.
And and buzzwords and sort of it all going back to they're really comfortable. So what do we need to do to provide? It's almost like comfortable discomfort. Having the conversations that are uncomfortable but at least understandable, that are speaking the language that can change mindsets. I mean that's the tougher thing. But it has to be done, and I think we have to just keep talking about it and keep engaging with people who have those positions.
Nikki, did you want to add anything, or?
I mean, a lot of it was certainly covered. There's a lot of old guard in productions that refuse to evolve. Unfortunately, some think that it's a trend that's temporary, but like Raul said, we're growing in numbers. And I do strongly believe that the audience also holds a significant power to influence the choices made up above. For a lot of these heads, yes, it's the spreadsheets, it's the dollar bills, it's the business. If they see viewers that desire more content celebrating diverse voices and being inclusive of those voices, I want to be an optimist and believe that there's an opportunity to create more content like that. Of course, hoping that we get paid fairly while at it, while doing the job too.
Yeah, I think it's deep down it's a question of taking risk and kind of like not being afraid to do that first step. And in the part of the creators is something that actually Henson used to say in terms of respect your audience. You're gonna enter this world of telling diverse stories, telling the stories with a different point of view. Be sure that you respect your audience and you treat the audience as someone who's doesn't have the pre-assumption that they don't understand anything. People are intelligent. People are open to see and to enjoy different stories.
I think we're also seeing content coming out of different places where people felt like, well, the Hollywood machine is not listening to me. There's no space for me there, so I'll make my own space. So when people are making their own content, I think that that is a way of, as you described, Nikki, that they have to respect or listen to what the audience is asking for. You have to fill those needs, and I'm encouraged also by the fact that people are feeling their own needs. And they may not be big blockbusters, but people are making content. I was thinking about Mama K's Team 4, and like this is animation coming from the African continent, and like people are starting to notice. So the more of that's also super encouraging and part of this process, I think.
And you all made reference to, in your meetings in your daily lives being loud and things are starting to bubble up. And we have great organizations, from whether it be workers or fans, like Sidney, you work with Black Women Animate. There's Latinx animation in animation. There's women in animation. In fact, in creating these questions, in going to these sites, I received more information from these sites, than other places that would normally be there. So, do you think that power in numbers will help with this to get the message across? And is that more what's needed?
And persistence, and a lot of persistence.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's kind of somewhat of a controversial question, but I think I'll ask it. Can and should non-underrepresented person write diverse characters?
I think yes. I mean, I think yes, but that means making some kind of effort to understand the culture that you're gonna write for, and that means again the respect aspect of it is important, and it's something interesting because it makes you study and make you immerse yourself in that culture that you want to write about. But I think that definitely yes. Obviously, you have to be surrounded by people that will answer your questions. So you really are respectful, and you really are taking those aspects of the culture that you want to represent to be true. And again, what we were saying before, avoid the tropes, avoid the cliché, avoid the stereotypes.
I think that a non-underrepresented person can definitely write great characters and a great story, and they can be an excellent ally to DEI efforts. But if you're genuinely looking for an authentic voice, get people from the community you're trying to represent. Get a consultant, have writers and leads within the group that come from that community to ensure that what is being written is as respectful and as true as it can possibly be.
Well said.
Completely agree.
Absolutely. And I mean, bravo to both of these answers. But the only thing I would add is that these writers should remember that they are in service to the character and the story. They're not, it's not their ego trying to make this thing. They're to serve that character and story. And if that's their mindset, they can. If that's not the mindset, I don't know that they should. So can and should are two different things. It's something that I do think it's something you kind of earn. But it's about service to that community, that story, and those characters.
I'm going to shift to our audience questions. We have a few lining up here. Paola asked, in storytelling, how do you make character interactions and communications natural and not on the nose?
Is it about dialogue and things?
I think it sounds like it's about the character behavior, maybe the performance of the character.
I think you have to understand the characters you're writing for. I mean, you have to understand who's one character, who's the other character, and deep down, kind of like write mentally the story of those characters. They arrive to that point where they confront, where they talk, and knowing, having that back information, probably the dialogue will come naturally because you know the characters so inside out that you know how they feel. And remember, the important thing in animation is that you have to make the audience believe that your characters are thinking what they're saying, and they move because a mental process, not because they just go from A to B. So in terms of personalities, is the same thing. You just don't create cardboard cutout of character one and cardboard character cutout part two. No, those characters have a biography, have a story behind, have a motivation. And when they talk, one thing is the thing they say, another thing is the thing they mean. And you have to play with those layers of communication when you write the dialogue for those characters. If not, as you were saying, the whole thing is kind of contrite and fake, because you're playing with characters with no dimension. And I think it's important to give the characters that dimensionality to allow the audience to feel something about the characters.
Excellent. I'm looking at a Google Doc where someone's typing. And I watched them type, and Paola is responding saying, yes, dialogue and how they act is the aim of the question. Good. So I think that was a great answer, Raul. Thank you. Bradley asked, for your particular films, is there any, or shows, is there anything you learned through your own stories that came to light as a life philosophy that began to grow after you produced your films? There's a second part. Certainly all the films were a big part of your natural beliefs, but sometimes things unveil themselves when you dive that deep inside yourselves that offer more growth. So what aspects of yourselves grew thanks to your exploration through filmmaking in your particular films? Great question, Bradley.
I can start. Okay, the first film I ever directed, and it was called The Missing Links. Links like the cat, not like the link. and again, it was produced by Antonio Banderas, our studio in Spain. And the film was basically about a lynx that live in a very special natural environment in the south of Spain, in Andalusia. And what I learned was that from going so kind of local, I could reach the whole audience worldwide. And the film actually was sold to 47 countries. And basically the film kind of like helped me to understand things like ecology and preservation and taking care of the environment. That till that point, it was in my radar, but it was not as intense as when I started researching for the film. And the thing that I thought it was the more touching part was that thanks to the film, we can launch a campaign to help to preserve the Iberian lynx. This was a species close to extinction. So we went beyond the film, and during the making of the film, we actually learned about this process, and obviously the film helped somehow to reach the point where we are now, where yeah, the lynx is still kind of like a species about to be extinct, but there's been a lot of progress into it. And the more amazing part was that this film, who was located again in just a little natural park in the south of Spain, the themes that we touch about all this story went worldwide, and it was successful. And suddenly the film was a hit in places like South Korea. What was the relation between South Korea and a place in Huelva in the south of Spain? So that was something that baffled me, because you never understand the power of cinema till something like this happens. And suddenly the things that you're doing, that you're taking care of your little parcel of culture and beliefs, when the movie's out, it reaches worldwide, and it can really change the world.
That's amazing.
Sorry, I was muted. I love that. That was a beautiful anecdote. Sidney or Nikki, did you want to respond to Bradley's question, or shall I move on?
Go ahead, Nikki.
Oh, no, you can go ahead.
No.
I just want to make sure I'm clear what we have obtained from our journey so far, right? That's the...
Yeah, it's like bringing from your own creative work into your own life and your life philosophy and how it's kind of changed and altered you.
Okay. Yeah. Perfect. Well, in that respect, I think I've generally been a fairly introverted artist all my life, and having the opportunity to lead a show like Santiago, there were a lot of things where my gut instincts was, this is the way that we should go. This is the direction that I have. But there was that a bit of an imposter syndrome, that little voice saying like, maybe not, pull back. Fast forward to a time later, and I realized, oh shoot, I should have listened to myself from the get-go. Even though I was in a much greener place then, my instinct was right. So this whole journey has really helped me kind of strengthen my confidence in myself. And while doing that, if I see a similar instance where somebody from my crew has a hesitation, I want to make sure to, be the cheerleader and like, I completely understand what you're going through, but you're here for a reason. You have a voice that needs to be shared. So speak.
Beautiful. Sidney, did you want to add something?
Well, it depends. How many questions do we have? I want to be
okay. We've got about 20 minutes left, so we're doing okay, and we have another 4 or 5 questions. So, should we move on, or?
Yeah, we should move on, probably.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. This is from Beverly. Have you noticed a difference in the way people are represented due to the shift in working remotely? Are more voices being heard due to online accessibility?
I'd say so. And at least in the case of my production, especially with artists that we perhaps were limited because they had to be in the Los Angeles area. Now we can tap into other places like Atlanta, Georgia, or New York City, and that's been phenomenal. It has definitely given such great opportunities to people that probably couldn't make it out to Los Angeles for X or Y reason.
You think that will shift productions from here on, or you think it's temporary?
I hope that there is a hybrid future in store. If for a certain reason people cannot make it out to, say, Los Angeles, then there's an amount of understanding that is given and something can be arranged around that. But I'm sure that, that's my belief, but I'm sure that there's other folks, HR and all that jazz, that would probably have their say in the matter. So you can only do as much as you can to help others, thrive and succeed in their best scenario.
No, I think that if anything, the pandemic has helped to broaden the spectrum of artists that they can collaborate together. I'm working now in a project where the main studio is in Tijuana, in Mexico, but we're working with people in Ecuador, with people in Colombia, with people in Panama, and with people in Spain, and that bring those voices somewhere to channel their art and their knowledge that otherwise it will be impossible, because till fairly recently working in a big production meant to live in a big city or be in a big place where the studio was, but now that thanks to the internet and to the technology to have leveled the field in terms of different artists from different cultures, different places can collaborate in one common project, is being very helpful. I serve as a executive producer in the short film Mila, Cynthia Angelini, and there was a film who was done by 350 artists all around the world through co-working in an internet in a virtual environment. Those things are pretty amazing that we can do that we can reach people in India, people in South Asia, people in South America, and being able to combine that talent that otherwise they won't have a voice in the industry.
Mhm.
Absolutely. We see that in education as well. I run an animation contest that is international, and it highlighted these schools in Thailand that won the contest one year, beating these great schools like CalArts and USC, and it's virtually allows us to put the spotlight in places that we haven't been able to do before. So it's across the board. I think it's incredibly positive. Sidney, I have a question from John here for you. Given that so many kids' TV shows and features involve non-human characters, how is the issue of diversity addressed, and are there pitfalls in injecting stereotypes into non-human characters?
I'll answer B first. Yes, there are pitfalls in, in injecting those stereotypes. And I think whether it's an anthropomorphic animal or not, authenticity starts with who the character is, regardless of the body. There's still conversations around those things, and some of them go to not only design, but go into casting, certainly go into the dialogue. There are times where, it's very clear that a character that is designed, as a bear or a bunny or a dog, it's clearly it's a hip hop, with the buzzword urban, which generally has meant black. We know what that means, right? Okay, stories. So you really have to be intentional. You have to be more careful, I think, in these situations, that we aren't sort of falling back on tropes and things. So let's see. I don't know if I answered the first part of the question.
I think so. Yeah, I think that covered the whole question.
There are pitfalls. There are more discussions to be had, and it's about the design has almost become secondary to who's the character, what's the story, how did that person speak, what do they want, etc.
Here's a question from Viviana. Have you ever felt the pressure that you should always do work that represents your culture? Viviana's from Peru, and she loves to be inspired by legends or city life from her country, but sometimes also wants to draw universal monsters and things like that. Nikki,
that's a tricky question, because, okay, me being from Spain, that means that I only can direct movies that take place in Spain. We're all artists and we are all universal, and one of the wonderful things about animation is that you can go anywhere. You can tell stories about whatever you want. From the local stories from different cultures to universal stories that take place in another space or whatever. So I obviously, being from the country that you are and having the culture that you have, is going to permeate in whatever you do, whether you like it or not. So it's kind of like a given. I cannot avoid to think within my Spanish culture and put little details or little things in whatever I do, even if I work for a universal audience or for a wide world audience.
I imagine it's just going to come out naturally because that's who you are. Nothing that has to be too forced.
Yeah.
Daniela asked, do you believe that language can somehow be a barrier? Do you still see the need for projects to be typically produced in English to be better accepted?
That's a market question. That's a market question. Obviously, when you go to film markets to sell your film, English is the universal language. And any country, or whatever they are in the world, they respect that kind of a standard. And somehow it's true that the selling movies in an international market in different languages that they're not English, they're kind of difficult. But I think one thing is the story you tell, doesn't matter in what language. Another thing, the requirements of the market when you want to reach an international audience.
Thank you. Anyone else want to add to that? I saw some movement.
Well, I was thinking, I was also thinking of the show that we're producing for streamers, and because the streamers, part of their process is to localize for the world market. I agree that the story needs to be what it is, and it'll be the responsibility of the distributor to make sure that it is accessible, not necessarily acceptable, but accessible for the wide audience. Doesn't make it necessarily any better or better received, but at least it'll be accessible to the audience, and then the audience can decide how they feel about what is being presented to them. But I think this goes back to the authenticity piece. Let the story and characters be what they are, and let the marketing folks worry about the other stuff.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, I think we'll end on this wonderful positive question from Brittany. And she says, what has been the most enjoyable part of your journey to telling authentic stories?
Oh gosh. I just immediately from the get-go, the response from the audience. I've had parents email me or DM me that their kid who might have been hesitant to speak Spanish, they see a hero on screen who's speaking in Spanish, and now they want to learn the language. They're invested in it. It's like, oh, they're like mommy and daddy. They speak Spanish too. So seeing that programming can have such a meaningful impact in the life of our viewers is just, I get little goosebumps. It's incredible. I like being able to do that for others. So
Thank you for doing it.
Absolutely. For me, it's been about the process, about being able to have been doing this for a little while and having more conversations that have impact and make change among the crews, among executives, getting more yeses than I used to, getting more people saying like, let's try that, and sort of leveraging what I believe is positive energy and positive trust and positive and belief that the intention for this kind of authenticity is a good thing for everybody, really opening space in rooms with other executives who may have been hesitant, but who now are saying like, yes, let's try that. Yes, that is important. And I understand why. It's not just important to you, it's important to all of us. It's important to me too, who has a completely different background. That's been really satisfying.
Beautiful. Raul?
Yeah, definitely is the process, is the investigation and the work that you do to reach that point where you're ready to present a story to the audience. And then, as Nikki was saying, is the reaction of the audience when you do something. I mean, people coming to you saying, wow, you put there my culture, you put there the character who represent me. I think that's very rewarding because we all in our little bubble here trying to make our own stories and try to have as much fun as we can, and this goes into one of my philosophy in life. If you love what you do, the product that you're going to do will show that love, will show that integrity, will show that respect.
What a wonderful way to end this wonderful panel. I want to thank our panelists for taking time out of your incredibly busy schedules and imparting such incredible wisdom and information to us.
I want to echo that as well. This was a very wonderful panel, and thank you all for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you.
thank you for having us.
Yep.
Take care. Bye.